Me now with more on the situation in Ukraine are my colleagues CCTV's Nathan King and Jessica Stone. Nathan, why don't we start where she left off, this peace conference? What can we expect?
Very little, I'm afraid. I think, Mike, look, we're going into a situation where events on the ground are basically taking over. Ukraine, as a country, is in a very weak position. What is Ukraine? Crimea is gone, 10 towns in the east under some sort of occupation, whether it be by pro-Russian forces or whatever. And they have to decide now what a future Ukraine will look like. Now, remember, Russia's been pushing for a greater autonomy for Russian-speaking people. They feel that they might have the upper hand given the demonstrations that we've had. The West, all they really have at the moment when it comes to Ukraine is backing the interim government, which, remember, we haven't had elections yet since this crisis began. They're going to be on May 25th. And also the threat of sanctions hanging in the air. So no side is really ready to give up their red lines. There is very little room for negotiation, and there's bad feeling too.
And Jessica, NATO, what's the next step for them?
Well, today we heard from the head of NATO as well as the Supreme Allied Commander that they're going to be planning more troops on the ground, more ships in the sea, and more flights over the Baltic states. Basically, they're doing what they can, which is to reassure their allies, those NATO Baltic states. They can't do much more than that militarily. Certainly over Ukraine, they've decided that this is not a military solution, only a political solution. The only thing that the United States, for example, is considering is non-lethal aid at this point to the Ukrainians. I asked the Pentagon today, have you already begun to make any troop commitments? Because General Breedlove has said that he has gotten some requests to give them numbers. They have not made that decision yet anywhere at NATO. That's the next step for them in order to decide where the troops go and all of that. But we heard from the head of NATO about what he thought. Would this military action affect the talks? And he said that he felt it was necessary to enhance the deterrence effect, but he agreed that only a political solution is the right one here.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Nathan, you and I had a chance to chat about this. Yanukovych was being urged, don't use force against his own people, and now we're seeing it with the group that came in after.
And Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's made this point in the last 24 hours, is that, look, in the Maidan in February, there were freedom fighters, and now in eastern Ukraine, they're terrorists. And the messaging of the interim Ukrainian government, you can understand it, they were brought in under crisis, they're trying to get the message out, has been very weak. And even the Ukrainian people in Kiev want to know exactly what's going on. So you've got this situation where the Crimea has gone, eastern Ukraine is in some sort of crisis, and then they don't, the signaling from Kiev about what they're going to do is complicated. And remember, just in the last 24 to 36 hours, there seemed to be a response to terrorism, as they called it, moving into some of these towns, but then stopped by locals in the streets. So they're facing the same choice as Yanukovych had in a way. Do you fire on your own people? And then can you survive legitimately as a government? This is a very complicated crisis because, as you know, Ukraine, although it is a sovereign country since 1991, has ethnic divisions and hasn't built up the institutions over time that allows both or different ethnicities to live together and respect their own rights.
And of course, the concern at this stage, I guess, from all the parties, civil war.
Well, I mean, civil war is a phrase being bandied about. Look,
well, by the Russians. The United States came out today, said that's not what we're calling it.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And we're not at civil war. I mean, also, thankfully, the death toll has been very low in this conflict. If you want to look at a real civil war, then look at Syria. Yeah. The peace talks, of course, for Syria were also being held in Geneva.
All right. Well, thank you both for stopping by. I appreciate your observations.